Book of Heaven, Volume 4, Part 17. December 17th, 1902. In order to be a victim, permanent union with Jesus is necessary. This morning, when my adorable Jesus came, I was praying him to placate himself, saying to him, "Lord, if I cannot sustain the weight of your justice by myself, there are so many good souls among whom it can be divided, a little bit each, so that it might be easier to bear the weight, and the people might be spared." And he, "And you, my daughter, don't know that so my justice may unload the weight of someone else's chastisement upon some soul, she must be in possession of permanent union with me, in such a way that everything she does, suffers, intercedes for, and obtains, is granted to her by virtue of the union with me, established within her, as the soul does nothing but lay down her will, unifying it with mine. Nor could my justice do this, without first giving the soul the necessary graces to be able to suffer for the sake of someone else. And I, but how can union with you be permanent in me? I see myself so bad. And he, interrupting my speaking, added, "Silly one, what are you saying? Don't you feel me continuously within yourself? Don't you perceive the sensible movements I make in your interior, and the continuous prayer that rises within your interior, as you cannot do otherwise? Is this perhaps you, or I who dwell within you? At the most, sometimes you do not see me, but in no way does this mean that union with me is not permanent in you." I remained confounded, and did not know what to answer. December 18th, 1902. Jesus again takes her to suffer with him in order to conquer those who want divorce. As soon as I found myself in my usual state, blessed Jesus came, but in so much suffering as to arouse compassion. Then, all afflicted, he told me, "My daughter, come again to suffer with me, in order to conquer the obstinacy of those who want divorce. Let us try once more. You shall always be ready to suffer what I want, won't you? Do you give me your consent?" And I, "Yes, Lord, do whatever you want." As soon as I said yes, blessed Jesus laid himself within me as crucified. And since my nature was smaller than his, he stretched me so much as to make me reach his very person. Then he poured, very little, yes, but so very bitter and full of sufferings, that not only did I feel the nails at the places of the crucifixion, but I felt my whole body as transfixed by many nails, in such a way that I felt all of myself being crushed. He left me in that position for a little while, and I found myself in the midst of demons, who, on seeing me suffer like that, said, "In the end, this cursed one is going to win again, so that we don't make the law of divorce. Curse your existence. You try to harm us and to disperse our businesses by ruining our many toils, rendering them vain. But we will make you pay for this. We shall move bishops, priests, and people against you, so that next time we will make you drop this whim of accepting sufferings." And while saying this, they sent me whirls of flames and smoke. I felt myself in so much suffering that I could not understand myself. Blessed Jesus came back. At the sight of him the demons fled, and again he renewed in me the same sufferings, but more intense than before. He repeated this 2 more times, but even though I was almost constantly with Jesus, I would not say anything to him, because I was as though compressed by strong sufferings. Only he would say to me from time to time, "My daughter, it is necessary that you suffer for now. Have patience. Do you not want to take care of my interests as if they were your own?" And he would sustain me in his arms, for my nature could not bear alone the weight of those sufferings. Then he said to me, "Beloved, do you want to see the evil that occurred during those days in which I kept you suspended from this state?" At that moment, I don't know how, I saw justice. I could see it as full of light, of grace, of chastisements, and of darkness. And as many days as I had been suspended, so many were the streams of darkness that descended over the earth. Those who want to do evil and speak evil had become even more blind and had acquired strength to carry it out, turning against the church and against sacred people. I was surprised, and Jesus told me, "You thought it was nothing, so much so that you would not bother about it. But it was not so. Have you seen how much evil came about? And how much strength the enemies acquired, to the point of managing to do what they had not been able to do during the time in which I had continuously kept you in this state?" After this he disappeared. December 24th, 1902. Jesus tests her so as to ignite in her more the desire to suffer for love of him. The value of true knowledge of self. Continuing in my usual state, I found myself outside of myself, and I found our Lord, who had a cross near him that was all braided with thorns. He took it and placed it upon my shoulders, commanding me to carry it into the midst of a multitude of people, to give proof of his mercy, and to placate divine justice. It was so heavy that I carried it bent over, and almost dragging myself. While I was carrying it, Jesus disappeared, and as I reached a certain place, the one who was guiding me told me, "Leave the cross and remove your clothes, for our Lord is coming back, and he must find you ready for the crucifixion." I removed my clothes, but I kept them in my hands because of the embarrassment my nature felt, and I said to myself, "I shall drop them as soon as he comes." At that moment he came back, and finding me with my clothes in my hands, told me, "You have not even let yourself be found completely stripped, so that I might crucify you immediately. Well then, we shall leave it for another time." I remained confounded and afflicted, unable to articulate a word. And Jesus, to console me, took me by the hand and told me, "Tell me, what do you want me to give you?" And I, "Lord, suffering." And he, "And what else?" And I can ask of you nothing but suffering." And Jesus, and what about love? Don't you want some? And I, no, suffering, because in giving me suffering, you shall give me more love. I know this out of experience, that in order to obtain graces, the strongest love, and all of you, these cannot be obtained but through suffering. And in order to earn all your sympathies, delights, and satisfactions, the only and sole means is to suffer for love of you. And he, my beloved, I wanted to test you so as to ignite in you more the desire to suffer for love of me. After this I saw people who believed themselves to be something greater than others. And blessed Jesus said, my daughter, one who believes himself to be something before me and before men is worth nothing. The one who believes himself to be nothing is worth everything. First before me, because if he does something, he does not think he does it because he can do it, having the strength and the capacity, but rather because he receives from God the grace, the helps, and the lights. Therefore it can be said that he does it by virtue of divine power, and the one who has divine power with him is already worth everything. Second before men, because this acting by virtue of divine power makes him operate in a completely different way, and he does nothing but send forth the light of the divine power he contains within himself, in such a way that the most perverted ones, without wanting it, feel the strength of this light and submit to his volition. And here is how he is worth everything also before men. On the contrary, one who believes himself to be something, in addition to being worth nothing, is abominable to my presence, and because of his ostentatious and particular manners, for he believes he is something, and makes fun of others, men keep him pointed out as an object of derision and of persecution. December 26, 1902. Calumnies, persecutions, and contrasts serve to justify man. As I was in my usual state, I felt all oppressed, and with a fear of receiving persecutions, contrasts, calumnies, not only to myself, for I do not care about myself because I am a poor creature who is worth nothing, but to the confessor and other priests. So I felt my heart crushed by this weight, unable to find respite. In the meantime, my adorable Jesus came, telling me, my daughter, why be disturbed and restless, and waste time with this? As for your things, there is nothing there. And besides, everything is divine providence that allows calumnies, persecutions, and contrasts, in order to justify man, and to make him come back to union with his Creator, one-on-one, without human support, just as he came out when he was created. As good and holy as man may be, he always keeps something of the human spirit in his interior, and also in his exterior he is not perfectly free. He always keeps something human for which he hopes, on which he relies and leans, and through which he wants to obtain esteem and respect. But let the wind of calumnies, persecutions, and contrasts come about a little bit. Oh, what a devastating hail the human spirit receives! In fact, seeing himself opposed, unpopular, despised by creatures, man no longer finds satisfaction among them. On the contrary, helps, supports, trust, and esteem fail him altogether. And if before he used to go in search of them, afterwards he himself shuns them, because wherever he turns, he finds nothing but bitternesses and thorns. He shall turn to his center, God, completely and without the slightest hindrance. God shall give himself completely to him, and man shall give himself completely to God, applying his intellect to knowing him, his memory to remembering God and his benefits, his will to loving him. And so, my daughter, here is man justified, sanctified, and the purpose for which he was created restored within his soul. And even if later on he has to deal with creatures, and he sees helps, supports, and esteem being offered to him, he receives them with indifference, knowing what they are from his experience. And if he makes use of them, he does it only when he sees the honor and the glory of God. But what remains is always God and himself alone. December 30th, 1902. Jesus shows her earthquakes and destructions of cities. One act contrary to the divine will is sufficient to destroy the work of Jesus in the soul. As I was in my usual state, I seemed to see the most holy Trinity, as if they wanted to resolve what they should do with the world, and I was in their midst. It seemed that they were saying, "If most fierce scourges are not sent to the world, everything is over for it concerning religion, and they shall become worse than barbarians themselves." And while they were saying this, it seemed that wars of every kind, earthquakes destroying entire cities, and diseases were coming down upon earth. On seeing this, all trembling, I said, "Supreme Majesty, forgive the human ingratitude. Now more than ever, the heart of man has rebelled. But if man sees himself being mortified, he shall rebel even more, adding outrages upon outrages against your Majesty." And a voice coming from their midst said, "Man can rebel when he is merely mortified, but when he is destroyed, his rebelling ceases. Here we speak not of mortification, but of destruction." After this they disappeared, but who can say how I was left? More so since I felt as though a disposition for wanting to go out of this state of suffering, and a will not perfectly conformed to the divine volition. I could see with clarity that the ugliest offense that the creature can give to the Creator is to oppose his most holy will. I felt the pain of it, and I greatly feared I might be doing an act contrary to his will. But in spite of this, I could not quiet myself. Then, after I struggled very much, my adorable Jesus came back and told me, "My daughter, many times I delight in choosing souls, surrounding them with divine fortitude, in such a way that no enemy may enter into them. I establish in them my perpetual dwelling, and in this residence of mine I lower myself, one could say, to the most minute services. I clean her up. I pull out all thorns from her. I destroy all the evil that the human nature has produced in her. And I plant in her all the beautiful and good things that can be found in me, to the extent of forming the most beautiful garden of my delights, to be used at my pleasure and according to the circumstances of my glory and of the good of others. So much so that it can be said that she no longer has anything of her own, but serves only as my dwelling. Now, do you know what it takes to destroy all this? One act, contrary to my will. And if you oppose my will, you shall do all this. And Lord, I fear that my superiors may give me the obedience of the other time. And he, this is none of your business. I myself shall deal with them. But here, there is your will. In spite of this, I could not calm down, and I kept repeating in my interior, what a dismal change has taken place in me. Who has separated my will from the will of my God that seemed to be one? December 31st, 1902. The victim's soul is greatly loved by Jesus, but sometimes she is nauseating to him because her exterior appears before divine justice as covered with the sins of others. Continuing to be with a fear that I might oppose the will of my adorable Jesus, I felt all oppressed and distressed, and I was praying him to free me, saying, Lord, have pity on me. Don't you see the danger I am in? How is it possible that I, most wretched little worm, would dare so much as to feel myself opposed to your holy will? And besides, what good can I possibly find? And into what an abyss shall I plunge myself if I am separated from your will? While I was saying this, blessed Jesus moved in my interior, and through a light that he sent me, he seemed to say to me, you never understand anything. This state is state of victim. When they offered you as victim for Corrado, you accepted. Now, what is the evil present in Corrado? Is there perhaps not rebellion of the creature against the Creator, between priests and secular, and among parties? Now, your unwanted state of rebellion, your fear, your pains, are an expiatory state. And this state of expiation I myself suffered in Gethsemane, as I reached the point of saying, if it be possible, let this chalice pass from me, yet not my will, but yours be done. While I had so much yearned for it during the whole course of my life, to the point of feeling consumed. On hearing this, it seemed I regained tranquility and strength, and I prayed him to pour his bitternesses into me. I drew close to his mouth, but as much as I sucked up, nothing would come out, only a most bitter breath that embittered my whole interior. So seeing that he was not pouring anything, I said, Lord, you do not love me any more. Bitternesses you do not want to pour. Pour your sweetnesses at least. And he, quite the opposite. I love you more, and if you could enter into my interior, you would see with clarity in all of my parts distinct love toward you. Sometimes I love you so much that I reach the point of loving you as much as I love myself, although some other times I cannot look at you, and you are nauseating to me. What a thunderbolt these last words were for my poor heart. To think that I was not always loved by my loving Jesus, and that I reached the point of being an abominable soul. Had he not himself run to explain to me the meaning of this, I could not have survived. So he added, "Poor daughter, is this very hard for you? You have encountered my same lot. I was always who I was, one with the sacrosanct Trinity, and we loved one another with eternal, indissoluble love. Yet as victim, covered with all the iniquities of men, my exterior was abominable before the divinity, so much so that divine justice spared no part of me, rendering itself inexorable to the point of abandoning me. You are always who you are with me, but since you occupy the state of victim, your exterior appears before divine justice as covered with the sins of others. And this is why I spoke those words to you. You, however, calm yourself, because I love you always." Having said this, he disappeared. It seems that this time, blessed Jesus wants to make me upset, though he immediately gives me peace. May he be always blessed and thanked. January 5th, 1903. Freedom is necessary in order to recognize the good and the evil. This morning, I felt almost free of sufferings. I myself did not know what to do when I felt I was outside of myself, and I saw people from our country who, in addition to the words and the calumnies they had spoken, were plotting to come to deeds. In the meantime, I saw blessed Jesus, and I said, "Lord, you give too much liberty to these infernal men. Up until now it has been about infernal words, but now they want to reach the point of laying hands on your ministers. Bind them, and have compassion on them, and at the same time defend those who belong to you." And he, "Daughter, this freedom is necessary in order to recognize the good and the evil. Know, however, that I am tired of man, so tired that I share it with you. In fact, when you feel that tiredness of this state of victim, and almost the will to go out of it, this comes to you from me, and I warn you to be attentive, not to put your will in, for I am looking for the will of the creature to lean on it, and chastise the rebels. However, let us try. Again I shall make you suffer, and they shall be left without strength, and shall not be able to do anything of what they want. Who can say what I suffered, and how many times he renewed my crucifixion? And while doing this, raising his hand toward heaven, he told me, "My daughter, I did not make man for the earth, but for heaven." His mind, his heart, and everything that his interior contains were to exist in heaven. Had he done this, he would have received the influence of the most holy Trinity within his three powers, and it would have been copied within himself. But since he occupies himself with earth, he receives mud, rot, and the whole bilge of vices that the earth contains. January 7th, 1903. Jesus reproduces in Luisa the very sufferings he suffered in his humanity, and with the same power and effects. Continuing in my usual state, I was thinking, how is it possible? How can it be true that because of a few sufferings of mine, the Lord would suspend chastisements and debilitate the human strengths, so that they may not start revolutions and form iniquitous laws? Besides, who am I to earn all this with a few sufferings? While I was thinking of this, blessed Jesus came and told me, "My daughter, neither you nor the one who directs you have comprehended your state. Indeed, in your state of sufferings you disappear completely, and I alone, not mystically, but in living flesh, reproduce the very sufferings that my humanity suffered. Was it perhaps not my sufferings that debilitated demons, enlightened blinded minds, and in a word, formed the redemption of man? And if they could do this at that time in my humanity, can they perhaps not do it now in yours? If a king went to live in a little hovel, and from there he dispensed graces, help, and coins, he would continue his office of king. If anyone would not believe this, one would say that he is foolish. If that is a king, he can do good in the little hovel just as in the royal palace. Or rather, one admires his goodness more, because king as he is, he does not disdain to live in little hovels and miserable huts. Such is your case." I comprehended all this with clarity, and I said, "My lord, everything you say is fine, but the whole difficulty of my state is in the coming of the priest." And he, "My daughter, even if a king lived in little hovels, because of circumstances, necessity, and his very status of king, it is appropriate for his ministers never to leave him alone, but to keep him company, serving him and obeying him in whatever he wants." I was left so convinced that I did not know what else to say. You have reached the end of the Book of Heaven, Volume 4, Part 17. Fiat.